Well, folks, it's Henry Rogers here with the Daily Caller News Foundation, and Ralph Northam actually just pulled up to the scene here. We are live in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, where Ralph Northam actually just pulled up to greet some of his fans who are out here, as you can see, with their signs. And I guess they were already awaiting his arrival. They knew that he would be greeting them here. So we're going to go up and we're going to interview these people and see possibly why they would be voting for Ralph Northam.
That's what's on their website
I know,
right now.
I got you. You want to talk to me? I'm a recovering Republican.
Don't have any time for you, I'm sorry.
No time for us? Hey, were any of y'all willing to talk to the press about why you're here today?
No.
No, but thanks anyway.
Would you like to speak with us, sir?
No.
Right here, folks, is what democracy looks like. This is what Virginia looks like. And with any luck, we'll be able to get so many more people into office this year that really represent our Commonwealth.
Now, what are you worried about if Ed Gillespie was going to be elected? What would you be concerned about? What would your main concerns be?
Sure. Number one would be all the assaults on women's health care, for example. Because right now, we're doing a pretty good job of funding Planned Parenthood, but I know that Ed Gillespie wants nothing to do with that. Another one would be he wants to bring fracking and offshore drilling to Commonwealth of Virginia. And frankly, we want to keep our green spaces and our waterways safe. And that kind of activity does the exact opposite of that.
So why are you here today? Why are we supporting Ralph Northam?
We're supporting Ralph Nordstrom for unity of people, representative of all different types of people. I don't feel that Ed Gillespie is going to represent all people. That's basically it.
Now, what would you like to hear from Ralph Northam today?
Well, I won't be in there today. I'll be watching him on TV.
What would you like to hear from him? Now, are you worried about Ed Gillespie? Are you worried about him at all? Are you worried about his...
I think he represents some of the racism. I think lack of sensitivity, basically, on Charlottesville. I was one of the people who marched from Charlottesville to D.C. because I feel that passionately about it. I was there the day of the riots, and he didn't support us and didn't come out. And there is true racism there. The cockroaches are allowed to come out now into the daylight. They didn't used to be. They used to come out at night. The people with the Klans, the KKKs, they used to keep their heads covered. Now they're allowed to come out, and I think a lot of that has to do with our current administration.
So, folks, we're hearing here from a lot of different Ralph Northam supporters. They are giving us their key issues here that they want to hear from Northam in tonight's debate, as well as why they are officially supporting Ralph Northam, and as well as what they are concerned about from Ed Gillespie's message.
All right, we are here with Austin here, who's here in force for the Gillespie campaign. Austin, so how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to see Ed Gillespie get down to the policy issues with Northam in this debate.
Definitely. So what is Gillespie's strongest policy kind of proposal for you?
Look, for me, I'm a college kid. I want jobs. And I think Gillespie has the best economic plan.
Heard a couple chants of no-show Northam. Could you kind of delve into that a little bit further and explain exactly what that means?
So I don't think that's a voting issue for me necessarily. I do think it's important to stress that in the job he had as lieutenant governor, he didn't show up, I think it was to a board meeting for more than half of the time. I'm a little sketchy on the information there. I would check any number of our press releases. But I mean, part of getting a job is doing the job. And I think the governor's race is just like a job interview, except it's for everyone. So, I mean, part of it's showing up and doing the work. I don't know how better to phrase it. If you're going to be in the Republican Party, I think it's because of ideas that help everyone. And I think on economics or on education or on reform, governance, all of these things are designed to help all people have good access to the best life they can have.
What any big moments coming out of this debate?
That's a really good question. I think the first debate was a solid Gillespie win. I'm not sure a ton of new stuff has come out. I would love to see Gillespie engage in a really strong comparative with Northam, explaining how 4 years from now, the economy is going to look different when you have broad-based economic reform that gives back to small businesses and individuals, allows us to make our own decisions with freedom, and actually return the economy to something that works on a market basis. So that's what I hope to see.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here. So tonight's debate was definitely very interesting. You saw a lot of blows on either side. Personally, when I was counting, I think Ralph Northam seemed to be a little bit more aggressive compared to Ed Gillespie. What does everyone think about the?
Yeah, so I would agree. I think Ralph Northam came out very strong. I don't think there was much of a difference between the two candidates when it came to strength or a display of strength. However, it seemed that Ralph Northam had his talking points down, and he was able to deliver them better, slightly better than Ed Gillespie, in my opinion.
This country is not ready for single payer in my mind. And again, we need Congress to do their job and make sure that all Americans, I mean all Americans, have access to affordable and quality health care. And Ed Gillespie needs to stand up and let Virginia know where he is on this. You know, as far as calling me no-show, let me tell you what I've showed up for. I showed up for the United States Army to protect this country, to protect our freedoms. I fought during Desert Storm, taking care of wounded soldiers. I've taken care of children and their families for 25 years. I've showed up at 2 o'clock in the morning when there are dying children in the emergency room. I showed up on the Senate, fought for the smoking ban, fought for concussion, fought for a balanced budget in Virginia. And as the Lieutenant Governor, I did not miss a minute in 4 years of presiding over the Senate. I'm very proud of that. So I have showed up. Virginians know I've showed up. I have a record to support that. Ed Gillespie, on the other hand, is a K Street lobbyist. The only time he has showed up for anybody in Virginia is when he's paid.
I didn't detect a huge disparity in the performance. I think this debate ended up featuring civility as the main topic of conversation.
You know, the Lieutenant Governor serves on the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, or at least is supposed to, is a member of its oversight panel. And yet he missed about 60% of those meetings. Now, I don't know if he was at the meeting where they approved $1.4 million for a Chinese company with a fake website and voted, thought it was a good idea, or if he wasn't at it and should have been at it. But in either way, you got to do the job you're in before you seek a promotion. And 40% attendance record at VEDP is pretty good compared to the fact that at our Homeland Security Commission, or the Secure Commonwealth panel, which he's also a member of, he attended exactly 0 of its meetings. The Center for Rural Virginia, which is trying to help get broadband and foster economic growth in the rural parts of our Commonwealth and infrastructure and job creation there, he made exactly 0 of those meetings. And so I do think it's reflective of his performance in the job he's in now, but I also think that it also reflects a problem with the economic development approach that we have had. That's why there's been, the JLARC study of VEDP and its structure and the need to reform it, I take to heart, and I think we do. Those things are not good for Virginia. And if I'm the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, I have one thing and one thing only on my mind: what's good for Virginia. And I will work with the Trump administration on policies and on programs that are good for Virginia, and I will oppose them when there are things that are not.
Both candidates and Chuck Todd continued to talk about the necessity of civility in today's political climate. Both candidates stuck pretty strongly to their talking points, and both candidates seemed hesitant to come down on either side of a few key issues. You had Gillespie hesitating and sort of refusing to commit on whether he supports the Graham-Cassidy bill, and you saw the same thing from Northam on a few different issues. He waffled a little bit on monuments and what he was willing to do in that arena. And so overall, I think both candidates played it pretty safe.
When it comes to tonight's debate, I think that both candidates came out fairly strong, but I think Northam was stronger, to be honest with you. He did this in a way of using President Trump as almost a talking point throughout the debate. When Philip was discussing hit jobs throughout the debate, these hit jobs were Northam actually bringing up issues he did not even know if Gillespie supported or not, that were the president's issues. I found that very interesting throughout the debate to see Northam throw these hits, these constant hits about President Trump at him. And of course, Gillespie chimed in saying, well, I don't know if Northam will be able to work with President Trump due to this hostility he has for the president.
And I think Gillespie made a really good point in the press conference when asked about his ability to cooperate with President Trump, and that is that so much of Virginia's economy is actually dependent on federal government spending. So that obviously necessitates a high level of cooperation between the Virginia governor and whoever happens to be in the White House at the time. He did bring up, and Chuck Todd brought up as well, Northam's attacks on Trump and how vocal he's been in going after Trump. And, suggested that might make it difficult to achieve that level of cooperation that he believes Virginians really need.
Yes, and another point as well. I think that when it comes to education was a hot topic about this in this debate as well. And Virginia is a right-to-work state, and I would like to hear from both of the candidates maybe at some future point is what are you going to do with that status as right to work? Are you going to make that an example nationally? How are you going to support that? What are the specifics for both candidates in their support of right to work? So I'd like to see some more on that. And also when it comes to healthcare, with under Obamacare, premiums rose in many other states. However, Ralph Northam didn't necessarily, he came out kind of in support of having interest in Medicaid and Medicare, but I would like to see the difference in the future, again, in future debates as this progresses, how both candidates would like to implement and further healthcare here in Virginia.
Definitely. And I think what's interesting, going off of Jack's point here, it's very important to talk about the fact that there was definitely a third candidate on the stage today, and that is the elephant in the room, always Donald Trump. Pretty much a lot of some of the questions were directly, that Donald Trump does this, do you support it? Or how, to asking about how will you work together with somebody. That was an interesting question. But also I think what was another interesting tactic by Ralph Northam, of course a Democrat, was when he would essentially declare what his stance was, declare how it was different from Donald Trump's stance, and then kind of say, and I assume that my opponent agrees with President Donald Trump on this issue, and just kind of move on. And I think that was an interesting strategy, one that the debate moderator Chuck Todd really kind of allowed happen, because a lot of these times in his quest to make sure there was enough time for the Metro question, basically there was enough he basically kind of kept cutting off from there being a mature, thoughtful response to any of these accusations.
Yes, and on that same note as well, when it comes to Trump and conflating, any Republican candidate with Trump, I think that was a moment where Ed Gillespie could have shined really right there and said, well, this is how I'm different and this is how I'm going to progress the state of Virginia. Because, okay, Trump is president, that's great, but Ed Gillespie or Ralph Northam, either of them in their position as governor, maintain the state of Virginia in itself. And so Gillespie really could have focused on how he was going to make the state better and how he could have maybe diversified from Trump, whereas Ralph Northam kind of put him in this category, and then Gillespie didn't really, he didn't really rebut against that.
Yeah, and in a certain sense, the limits of that role as governor do protect Gillespie from answering certain questions regarding what's going on at the national level with the healthcare debate. Specifically, the talking point that he kept returning to, and you could tell really had prepped to rely on, was the idea that he will not support any legislation at the national level that would hurt Virginians. So he kept it at that broad level and wouldn't really comment on the specifics of any of the healthcare plans that we've seen circulating among the GOP this summer, of which there are, as everyone knows, several. Rather than do that, he fell back on his limitations as the head of state in Virginia, and said simply that he would not be in support of any repeal and replace plan that would hurt Virginians and penalize them for not expanding Medicaid and being what he termed fiscally responsible with their Medicaid dollars.
In Gillespie's defense, I will have to say, it is hard as a Republican to come out and basically denounce President Trump or say that you are against President Trump on certain issues, because that takes away from a large majority of your base. So there are a lot of conservatives who still support the president. There are still a lot of conservatives who do not support the president. But Gillespie is obviously trying to play it safe here in the middle. with the Trump supporters, so he doesn't lose that side. Because as we know, the Republican Party has kind of divided here over President Trump, and what Gillespie is fearing, I believe, is that he will lose some of those supporters if he does go against Trump on some certain issues.
Well, with that, we thank you very much for joining us on quite an episode of Protester Game Day / of course, the main game day, the debate. This is the Virginia Gubernatorial race is only going to go up from here. We have groups on either side of the aisle announcing millions in dollars in ad spending coming up, and so it's just going to be a bitter debate here between Ed Gillespie, Ralph Northam, and President Donald Trump, apparently. Thank you very much for joining us.